Kevin, Mohammed. So we're joined
Yes.
for our item writing question and answer session by test production manager Kevin Rutherford. What we've done, we've taken the questions that you've posted on the forum. So we've sort of combined and we've combined them together thematically, and we're going to go through some of them with you now. So we'll spend about 5 minutes on each slide. So each slide has a particular theme, and we'll get Kevin's perspective and any comments that we have to add on the questions that you asked. So beginning with questions around formatting, style, word counts, and LexTutor, and so on. So house rules around contractions, whether they're counted as one word or two, hyphens, if there's any kind of standardization on this, Kevin?
Yeah, well, we do have a style sheet which I think you shared with the participants of the course, and so we follow that. It may not cover everything, but we do aim to produce the content in terms of kind of punctuation and contractions and things like that in a standard way. And we do have a process. In fact, one of the last stages before a test goes live is that there is a review of the content actually on the screen, just to weed out any anomalies like that.
Just to add, the document Kevin is referring to is called 2020 App Test Proofreading Guide, which we introduced towards the end because there was not ready. So that's introduced in week 6. So item writers can go through that document, which covers most of the points which are asked here on this slide.
Yeah. I suppose the things like with hyphens, especially, you know, it's a bit like tomato, tomato, isn't it? So when you get multiple writers working on the same text, you do get discrepancies sometimes. Contractions, are they, if we use Word, MS Word, contractions are counted as one word?
Yes.
Especially in reading and listening texts. So stick to the tool in Word, as that's the one that we use rather than LexTutor.
On listening ones, I think the priority is on syllable count, not on word count. So this is something we need to keep in mind, whether it's we writing with contraction or not, but we should look at the syllable count range for each level.
Yeah, and contractions presumably will reduce the syllable count, but
that's right.
That's always going to override the word counts with listening items. Yeah. Okay. How many words above the recommended K level in an item? Surely a degree of common sense is needed. So this 95% rule that we have from B1 level and above.
Yeah, I mean, common sense is needed. I mean, we know, and I know that it's been discussed on the forum about the kind of age of LexTutor and its measurement, and how there are references to things like internet, etc., that aren't included. So yes, we do apply common sense. And essentially, you know, the judgment of the writer on that, and in terms of, yeah, I mean, the percentage, the 95%, for example, if you're writing a B2 text, you know, you hit 95% at the K5 level, and so you've got 5% to play with above that level, and you know, that's kind of what a normal text is like anyway. If you took a text from The Guardian or something and put it through LexTutor, you'd probably come out with those sort of numbers anyway. Obviously, you don't want to make target information above the K level, because then that would be creating a difficulty in the actual item focus. So
even if it's a word like internet, for example, or email, say in a
no, I think we would allow those. I mean, you know, we use internet and email and words like that. We consider those as being acceptable because of the widespread use, which wasn't the case when the Lex Tutor was established.
Yeah, so I think the answer here is that yes, we do have a degree of common sense, don't we? And
yeah,
we do recognise it has certain limitations, and then that 5% gap gives us some room to mitigate that. And then the final point is in terms of collocations. I presume this person's referring to idiomatic usage in particular, such as phrasal verbs and so on. So it's true that it rates individual words, but when you get a phrasal verb, for example, or a more idiomatic kind of collocation, it's not going to give you that particular usage. So you may have something a bit higher level, like red-handed, I suppose, for example. It's probably going to be quite, red and handed are going to be quite high frequency, but it's more idiomatic usage. So dealing with that, I suppose it's to do with whether it's whether the item is supposed to be more concrete in nature or more abstract in nature. So if it's more concrete, then obviously we should avoid more idiomatic and abstract usage because it would be beyond the level. Anything to add to that, Kevin?
Yeah, no, I yeah, agree with that. I mean, your example of red-handed, for example, yes, that if you take that, the constitute parts, red and hand, that would obviously come up as a high frequency word. But when you're talking about idiomatic language, there's a cultural element involved there, and you know, there isn't a Lex Tutor certainly doesn't measure you know, the degree of difficulty of idiom. So again, it comes down to a judgment. Idiomatic language can be used as long as it's not you know, the answer doesn't hinge on that, or that it can be sort of explained by the context, which is, you know, I mean, again, if you think about a reading text, that's part of what the reading element involves, is understanding words from context, even if you haven't encountered them before or not necessarily sure of what they mean.
Okay, so moving on to quality assurance and subjectivity. So the questions here are to do with consequences of producing red items, an orange item that would be still orange after the second review or the second draft, and if there's any policy on appealing decisions, particularly when they're more subjective, such as judging authenticity.
Well, I think behind this, it's important to consider what is this kind of relationship between the item writer and the people, in fact, who are doing the quality assurance. And it's most helpful, I think, to look at that in terms of, you know, the writer's relationship with the editor. That that's a kind of, you know, writers submit work for publication and then it's edited for various reasons. The editor works with the writer, gives feedback, and the writer revises according to the feedback. So it's a kind of, you know, dual process. So that's kind of what informs the quality assurance process. In terms of the production of red items, orange items, I mean, red, one would hope that would be avoided, because, I mean, the number of red items would be, a red item is something that is either not appropriate. So if something was submitted that was inappropriate because of its topic or content, and therefore it couldn't be revised because its topic was not relevant, then that couldn't be accepted. But I think those kind of submissions are going to be rare, if at all, given that there's the guidance of the topic areas, and there's also in terms of producing items, there can be some back and forth during the commission stage. I don't know if you've got anything more to add, Mohammed, on this.
Yeah, on this second point, I mean, on a specific answer to that is if second draft is submitted and it's still orange, so then the quality assurance team will make sure that the points which are raised in the first submission are appropriately included in the second submission. If they are, then we'll look other areas as well from that moderation sheet. So in that case, it could be orange, but maybe some minor adjustments required. So maybe it's not rejected, but we need to work out internally as a production team, and we'll update the item writer on that point. So yeah, it is possible that on second, like when the second submission comes in of the item, then the items are still orange because of some other reasons. On the third point, I just want to add, Kevin, what you mentioned that the QA process is not only one quality reviewers involved, but it's quality reviewers and plus test production team is also involved. So that decision is collective. So we look into all the areas as covered, and then we give status of orange or red. So it's not one person's decision. So I don't think so. We should put in that policy of appealing on a QA decision, because multiple people are involved in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because the person is right here. It is subjective. So for that reason, we need multiple perspectives on any issue. It's difficult just between two people even to pick up on everything. So ideally, the more you can have, the better. But certainly, a more collaborative process is necessary. Okay, moving on then to content topics and training materials. So I think the first question is very easy. Yes, the commission email that you're sent will tell you the particular variant that you're producing items for, and any other information that you need, along with any specifications and where to find them, and so on. So the next question is around choosing topics, so particularly on judging whether something is suitably abstract for higher levels. Kevin?
Yeah, I don't know about specific advice, but I mean, one way of looking at it is for example, are you talking about actions and things, or are you talking about motivations and opinions? I mean, that's kind of one of the kind of drawing the dividing lines between them. So, for example, I mean, if you were writing, again, coming back to the B2 text, if you're writing a B2 text on the history and the production of coffee, you could write that as purely a kind of historical document in which you give dates and mark kind of moments when there were innovations and what those innovations were and things like that. Or you could write the text which includes some of that information, but also has a degree of information about people's attitudes and opinions to coffee, and how did the introduction of coffee into the UK sort of feed into the insurance business, for example, and areas like that where you're taking it to another level. So, you know, that's a kind of approach you can think about, is if you think about your topic, which direction would you go down?
Mm-hmm. Then the next question is on recommended publications for sourcing and researching authentic material. I don't think we have a list as such, but sometimes you may start writing an item with a particular topic in mind, in which case you would do a simple Google search, and probably the first few hits that you would get would be from mainstream media. That would always be useful. So these National Geographic kinds of articles would probably be a good place to start if you're looking for inspiration. We've mentioned before airline magazines as a kind of baseline to keep in mind, because many people are a little bit anxious and nervous when they're flying. So if you look at the magazines, the content is fairly positive. The world is always a very happy and sunny place in airline magazines. So in terms of appropriate topics, that's something to bear in mind.
I think also we could begin to compile a list which we make available, and we'd be happy to receive recommendations from people if they have publications that they read. Sometimes, I mean, there are sources on the internet which collect and compile links to a lot of different publications, but if people know of particular ones that might be useful, then we could consider sort of building up a database of that.
Yeah, like I think you mentioned before, Kevin, like some magazines may go too far in a technical direction, like, I don't know, like Scientific American, is it called? Or
yes, yeah.
As an example, I haven't read it myself, but that would be an example of something that's too technical.
Well, I think the audience of Scientific American is scientists, whereas, for example, the audience for National Geographic is the interested ecologist, perhaps. I mean, I think the other point that's worth making here, though, of course, is that if you're going to write about a topic, then it is important that you do kind of do some research into it, and that you don't just write about it from your own kind of knowledge, I mean, or making kind of just general assumptions. Particularly, this is for the higher level texts that the reading texts do need to have some degree of substance to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next question, I think that's again quite quick to answer, Mohammed.
I can answer that. Yes.
Right. So simple, yes.
Okay.
And topics questions that have already been used. I don't think the item writer needs to worry too much about that at a test level, because we always, when we're building versions, we always check that we've got diversity of topics. And if it so happened that two writers wrote something on the same theme, then we could use one and bank the other. That wouldn't be an issue. But what we would say to avoid is to continually produce texts on the same, or continually to produce the same kinds of text. So in BA2 reading, for example, keep some variation in there. So we've had a submission where every single item was a biographical text, for example. So it's good to build in some variation into your own outputs.
And even for some kind of levels or questions, we tell the item writers in the beginning the areas, the topics or functions where appropriate. So we also tell them in the beginning when they start writing.
Yeah. And the final question about a larger bank of sample items. Does anyone want to take that one?
Well, this one came in from the last training as well, but yes, the answer is we will build a large number of examples wherever possible with commentaries, because that's really helpful for the item writers and also for other variants as well, like Apttus for Teachers, Apttus for Teens. So that's work in progress, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on. So this continues the same theme of contents and topics and so on. So it's difficult to avoid a Western-centric kind of view, because Western media is the one that's most exported, and for that reason it's more universally recognized. Do we think that could be in any way problematic, is the question here.
Well, I think it would be problematic if we focused entirely on it, but we do aim to avoid a Western-centric view. I mean, obviously, if by Western-centric we mean kind of, you know, anything that somebody from a country in the West, if we want to still go by those kind of definitions, you know, anybody who produces content is going to have a Western-centric view, and they can't, you know, put themselves into the mindset of a different one. Then that is something that, you know, is that something that we can address? I mean, at the moment, we do have a range of a number of item writers who have experience of different cultures and places. So hopefully that is one way we can address it. I don't know, have you got anything else to add to that, Philip?
Yeah, I think that covers it. And I think the main idea is that it's going to be, we have to keep in mind it's for a global audience, so it has to be recognizable in a universal context. So if you're going to go too far in the other direction and have something that's that's too localized or too specific, then that can be a problem as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we receive a commission, can we check if a topic is suitable? That's quick to answer. Yes, please do. We're always open for questions. Anything you want to check, please discuss with us, including topics and their suitability.
Mm-hmm.
The next questions, yeah, so this one comes up quite a lot. So there's some discrepancy between our topics list and the taboo list. So birthdays, for example, are on the taboo list, but we have example items where birthdays are mentioned. So I think the first point is that the topics list is based upon the CEFR, which has a slightly different purpose, a slightly different function. It wasn't only written with item writing in mind, and then the taboo list was developed independently of that. So they're two separate documents, but the idea is to use them both together and to cross-check between them. And they're evolving as well. So for that reason, sometimes we get example items that reference birthdays, for example. And so that means then that sample items become out of date in a sense, because they're now referencing taboo topics. So, but I would say stick to the taboo list. So if it's on it, then it's better to err on the side of caution. Kevin, would you agree?
Yeah, and also just to underline your point, actually the taboo list is something that we introduced it in its more specific terms, you know, about 2 or 3 years ago. I think 2017 probably it was. You know, before that we were kind of operating on the parsnips principle, which I think you covered in the course of you know, those key politics and alcohol, etc., that are topics to avoid. But you know, some things are on the taboo list not because they're taboo in the traditional sense that they would cause distress or offence, but because they are not necessarily relevant to all cultures and could lead to some misunderstanding. So that's kind of the rationale behind it. But I think yes, just avoid that topic if it's on the taboo list.
Also, to move forward, the question on that specific topic of pets, we will generate an updated topic list and we'll remove the pets topic from that. So it's in A1 and B1 areas. The pets are used on topic list, so we will remove that. So there is no ambiguity between two documents, taboo list and topics list.
Mohammed, do you want to take that final question on changing strand there?
Oh yeah, this was also communicated in my earlier emails to the item writers as a professional development kind of next stage for them in coming, we could say maybe in months' time when they all good at certain strand. So we will offer other strand for them to train, and the material is on the platform anyway. But yes, there will be an opportunity for people who want to be trained on the other strand, which they didn't take at this time.
Okay. So, advanced level content. So the second question there is quite easy. Yes, there is going to be training for Apttus Advanced, and it's separate because there are a few technicalities that we want to highlight. They're very interesting to produce, but there are a few technicalities associated with them, so we do dedicated training for that, and that is in the pipeline. So the first question is about, so I think this was about what kind of evolution do we expect from B2 level onto C1 level and C2 level? So to what extent does competence at C1 and C2 level go beyond linguistic to cognitive ability? I think the first point I would always say is that it's not just to do with the linguistic ability, but it's more to do with the breadth as well. So at B2 level, I think in the CFR, if you read the descriptors, there's a reference to your own field and your own specialization. So you can read texts about subjects you know about, but you may struggle more with other content. But at C level, that's kind of removed, I think, and it's more to do with the diversity of different topics that you're able to read or understand about. Do you have anything there to add, Kevin?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I mean, some people would say it's quite difficult anyway to kind of distinguish between C1 and C2.
Yeah, it is difficult. Yeah, because you need a clear construct of what it is that you're measuring at that level, don't you? And
yeah,
a clear definition of what C1 ability is as opposed to C2 ability. So yeah, it is difficult. And
I mean, it's worth noting that actually advanced is one of the variants that is actually proving very popular and is something that we're looking to kind of expand. So there will definitely be a need for more item writers to work in this area, and it's probably likely that we would want for writing advanced level content is probably where a degree of specialization would come in, that certain writers would prove to be very competent at writing a certain kind of item, and therefore we would kind of hope to exploit that.
Okay. Reviewing and communication. So this is about possible teams or a WhatsApp group for item writers, or potentially a forum for communication, peer discussions, and so on. So among other things, this would help reduce the risk of red items. Does anyone want to talk about that?
Yeah, like the answer to that, yes, we took that suggestion, whoever put down in the forum. We are going to have a forum, different forum for different maybe variants, or we will discuss that later, how to organize or operate the forum. But yes, the idea is good, and we are going to have some forums on the same platform where the item writers took their training. So one place in one areas will be easy to access those forums. And yeah, we will allow certain things for discussion, and it will be like optional activity for everyone. But time to time, we will also upload kind of videos and other stuff, example items, for example. So yeah, the idea is good, and we'll be working on that to establish those kind of forums in the future.
Yeah, I think, yeah, kind of establishing a community is a good idea, and you know, we've talked already about the kind of the communal nature of this kind of work anyway, in the sense that, you know, it's the writer and the editor and the back and forth process. So having some kind of community where it's possible for interaction is a good idea. But as Mohammed said, I think it would be, in a sense, it would have to be kind of slightly organic, and it would work because people were contributing to it. We although, as Mohammed says, we do want to continue with ongoing sort of training, which would be in the form of this kind of video, where we might you know, post a video where we're discussing a particular item type or a particular skill or something like that, and we would be kind of making those available for people to access. So yeah, we definitely want to kind of engender that sort of community concept.
Okay, thank you very much. And moving on to slang and varieties of English. So there was a question on so what's our position on American English? Also about slang, so the sort of current usage you might see. You could say it, you know, it would add to the items a dimension of authenticity. And then the comments that we've made in this course actually about colloquialisms, and specifically British English colloquialisms and formulations. So I think in the Mr. Green text, if you remember from the B1 feedback, I think we highlighted it makes me feel a bit rubbish and mate as being specifically British colloquialisms that we highlighted as something for editing. So yeah. What's our position on American English?
Well, there is a variant of Aptis General, which is Aptis American, and that is essentially a number of versions of the original Aptis, but it's gone through a review process and a revision process, quite an extensive one. So we do have a kind of that was produced in response to a particular market opportunity and a demand for that in certain parts of the world. So we do have a distinction between Aptis General and American English. I can only assume that this question comes from an American speaker.
And we do have quite a few American writers doing work for us.
Yeah. So you know, I mean, there may, if you're submitting items in your own idiolect, it could be that you might get some feedback on you know, changes that you need to make or have been made by the production team, because it's specifically an American English lexical item as opposed to British English, which of course is you know, it's the BNC that is the basis for the you know, the corpus and the lexical profile. So that's how we measure the profile, dependent on that.
So if we take a word like hood, for example, if you run it through the BNC, it's probably going to tell you the frequency for the thing that you would have on your coat rather than something that's part of your car.
Yes, I think a car vocabulary definitely is. I think almost every part of the car is different in American and British English.
So yeah, it would be difficult in some senses to run the BNC on American English, so you could run into difficulties that way.
Yeah.
Slang more generally, I mean, again, it's a universal test, so slang is typically region specific. So for that reason, we tend to avoid it, I think, don't we?
Yes, and I think we would probably differentiate slang and, you know, kind of colloquialisms and idioms. I mean, that's not slang per se, is it? And slang can often be quite time bound. You know, if you look at words that are used to kind of show, you know, approbation, like, you know, spiffing in the 1920s and far out in the 60s and wicked in the 90s, and I don't know what people say nowadays, but you know, those kind of things change. So yeah, I think we don't we kind of sand off the edges of the language in terms of slang, I think.
And that would probably include British colloquialisms, British slang as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, even then you could get down to regional slang, couldn't you? You know, people have different words to describe different things in different parts of the UK.
Like, I live in Manchester now, but they use words that I don't recognise half the time. Like, they call a bread roll a balm up here, I learned the other day, for example. Okay. Anything else to add here? Should we move on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, picture prompts.
Yeah, I think this one is quite a simple one to answer, in the sense that we don't actually ask the item writer to definitively select a photo from our resource, which is the iStock online photo gallery. That's made available. I mean, it's available to the general public. Anybody can go there. And it's possible to find an appropriate picture if you're writing speaking items, for example. But because there are a number of criteria that are involved in the final photo selection, that's actually left to the production team. But for example, if you were writing a sort of task 2 speaking, where you've got a photograph of some regular activity, and it's based around public transport. So maybe you've written your 2 prompts are what kind of public transport do you normally use and why? And your second one could be why is it important for cities to have good public transport? Those could be your 2 questions. The question that actually relates to the picture is a generic one. Describe this picture. The choice of photo doesn't have any impact on the prompts that you write. The choice of photo would not, it wouldn't be important for you to provide a definitive photo. You could, if you want to, you could just indicate what the photo should be, you know, people on public transport, and that's enough. Or if you prefer, you could select one from iStock just by typing in public transport into the search button, choosing one and including that or a link. But in terms of as I say, there's quite a lot of criteria involved, and those even change. I mean, now we have you know, considerations around our current situation and COVID and social distancing and things, and we've started to think about that as well. And in fact, if you go on iStock now, you'll see that there are a lot of pictures of people wearing masks and social distancing and things like that. So the short answer for this very long answer is that it's not the responsibility of the item writer to select the photo.
Yeah, and just to add on that IP point, we do use iStock. I think we have an agreement with them to avoid IP issues.
Yeah. We but even within that, there are restrictions. There are certain images from the iStock library that we can't use, and those, for example, include anything that has kind of, you know, that has images of IP. So, for example, if you wanted to show a fast food restaurant, it would have to be a generic non-branded one. You couldn't have an image of a McDonald's restaurant because those are marked as a separate category of photo, which isn't covered by our agreement with iStock.
Okay. And this final slide then is looking at questions around commissioning schedules and timelines and what's happening next, essentially. So I think this is going to be a written communication once the course is complete. Obviously, COVID is adding a dimension of uncertainty to everything that we're doing at the moment, as with most other things. Does anyone have anything particular to add?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we can't sort of answer these questions in detail now. So I think, as you say, we will be able to address them in a kind of written communication. We have actually had a pause on item writing production really since March, but we are going to start commissioning items again, but there may be some kind of limitations on what we can commission because of circumstances, operational circumstances. But I mean, in terms of, yes, I mean, in terms of the kind of schedule, yeah, the number crunching, the schedule, how are we going to commission, how much are we going to commission over the next 6 months? We'll be able to communicate that in a separate email.
Yeah, so the course is finishing now, so stand by for a post-course communication email, I think, and we'll outline the next steps and provide more details. Okay, so is there anything else? That brings us to the end of the questions I've collated. Does anyone have anything to add?
No, just other than to say thank you to both Mohammed and Philip for running the course, which by all accounts, although I haven't participated, I've been following it, and it's gone very well. And
yeah, thank you very much for your participation.
Yeah. And I would just want to add something. We just compiling or creating a survey, so I would recommend everyone to feedback on that survey, please. And thank you for active participation on the course. Thank you all. Over to Philip. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll second that.
Thanks.